Okay, so I thought I'd go differently if I wore a different shirt, but the raccoons were way more prepared this time, so it was much, much worse. This isn't something I plan on doing often, but this is a part 2 to last week's video. You don't have to watch it to understand what this one's gonna be about. It'd be cool if you did, but it's not necessary. Anyway, time to continue repenting by talking about Black and White were released in September of 2010 and took place in the American-based region of Unova. They're considered the black sheep, no pun intended, of the Pokemon franchise because of the new Pokemon designs, which I don't really understand. I think the new Pokemon this time around were really well designed, and they may take inspiration from Gen 1, and that's mostly because Gen 5 was kinda like a reboot for Pokemon. It feels isolated from all the other games, because during your playthrough, you can only catch the new Unova Pokemon. Some people dislike this, but I thought it was a great way to get people to actually use the Pokemon, because otherwise, who's gonna use this? One of the best parts of Gen 5 was the music. Most, if not all, of the tracks in these games are top tier. Black and White are also the only Pokemon games to get actual sequels. Up until this point, you'd get like a third version, like Crystal or Platinum, but Gen 5 had Black and White 2. They take place after the events of the first game and feature a slightly altered Unova. Some of the characters from the first games also come back, and I found it really cool how they were changed. They even added non-Unova Pokemon to the main story. However, this is still Pokemon we're talking about, so don't go expecting an entire new game. The Generation 5 games sold a combined total of 24 million copies. I like Gen 5, it's not as good as Gen 4, but I think it's a really solid group of games. Fun off-topic thing, during the 5th generation, PETA, or the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, released a game that degrades Pokemon for treating animals harshly. They called it Pokemon Black and Blue, and it's as fucking ridiculous as it sounds. Anyway, now on to I've barely played this one. Haha, funny. Pokemon X and Y Chromosome came out in October of 2013, and were the first Pokemon games on the 3DS. I think most people now know how rough the 3DS's life started, but by this point it had much better footing. These being on the 3DS meant they had to take advantage of the new hardware. You might be wondering why I said had to instead of got to, and that's pretty simple. The games look like this. Now this isn't terrible, and it actually looks fine on the 3DS's screen, but still, you can tell this is something new for Game Freak. The other 3D Pokemon games have a much nicer art style. Other than that, X and Y are fine games, but I really think Gen 6 is definitely my least favorite generation. It's not that it's bad, I just find it hard to play through the entire thing. They take place in the French-inspired region of Kalos. Kalos is a pretty neat region that features some cool terrain to traverse. This generation also had the Gen 3 remakes, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. They were released in 2014 and were good. I don't have a ton to say on them, because I kinda already went over Hoenn in the last video. The 4 games of the 6th generation of Pokemon sold approximately 31 million copies. There's not really much I can say about this generation. It's kind of my falling off point for Pokemon before getting back into it with the 7th gen games. Speaking of which, Pokemon Sun and Moon take place in the tropical Alola region. They were released in November of 2016 and were the 2nd generation of Pokemon games to be on the 3DS. These games look way better than X and Y did. At this point, Game Freak was much more comfortable with the hardware, leading to a much easier to look at art style. The Alola region is great in terms of diversity in the landscape. Instead of being one huge landmass, it's split up into 4 different islands, which makes the games have their own identity. Speaking of having its own identity, they got other gyms, that's crazy, right? That's part of the 3 things every Pokemon game needs. You might be wondering, what are the other 2 things? Well, that's a simple question. Hey Jackson, wearing a different shirt. What? What are the 3 things every Pokemon game needs? Oh, that's a simple question. Gyms, tutorials, and Pokemon. At least they won't get rid of the last one, right? The gyms were replaced by trials, which involved the player doing a small task, like a fetch quest or like a quiz, and then fighting a totem Pokemon, which is just a bigger Pokemon with enhanced stats. Anyway, Sun and Moon were followed by their Ultra versions a year later. They were pretty standard as far as updated versions go, still not adding a lot. The Pokemon added in this gen were pretty good, though there weren't as many this time around. These games were received pretty well by fans, with most of the backlash coming from trials in place of gyms. Pokemon Sword and Shield are probably the most controversial Pokemon games to date. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, well, then you're pretty lucky. Around June of 2019, Game Freak announced you wouldn't be able to transfer or obtain some Pokemon in Sword and Shield, which obviously upset a lot of people. Removing Pokemon from the games was unheard of, and people on both sides of this conflict were coming up with reasons as to why it was or wasn't okay. A whole new movement was created called Bring Back the National Dex, and these people made Twitter even more of a hellhole than it already was for the months leading up to and after the games were released. In November of 2019, the games were finally put out, and they were pretty well received. A ton of people noted that the games didn't look the greatest. I'd love to talk about this tree for some reason. Honestly, I enjoyed the games. I found them really fun to play through, and I really liked the way the Galar region looked. My only complaints are the very simple route layouts, some graphical errors like Poppin', and the whole not having every Pokemon theme. These games are getting DLC that takes place of the third game, and it adds new areas in Pokemon, so hopefully these fix the weaker aspects of the games. Whoa, I'm done. I can feel the injustice to Raccoon slipping off of me. I gotta do this more often. I'm gonna go jump on turtles or something. Bye, I guess.